This episode of Bend the Knee is brought to you by Lady Amanda of House Richardson.
Hello and welcome to Bend the Knee, a Song of Ice and Fire podcast. I am Sir Matt, the Bud Knight.
And I am Sir Ezra the Watchful. Welcome to our Song of Ice and Fire book club. Today we're into Chapter 51, Sansa 4 of A Game of Thrones. And in Fire and Blood, we will be discussing Heirs of the Dragon, a question of succession.
Yeah. This is where it all kind of goes down in Fire and Blood. Really, it's like, man, the Targaryens have had kind of a little bit of a bumpy start, but we've had a long, good reign with Jaehaerys, but now things are about to get heated up, to say the least.
I mean, such a good reign, so fruitful, so many children and grandchildren, you know, but almost too many, one might say. So,
yeah, business is about to pick up. Okay?
Yeah.
yeah.
No kidding. So yeah, just to start the show off here with our small council, we just had a fantastic conversation with our patrons.
Absolutely, yeah. Raven's Nest, second Raven's Nest was recorded. It's probably posted as the time of this comes out. Sir Ezra and I are recording before the Oscars, where we believe there will be a full trailer. So you may have heard from us twice before you listen to this. Don't know. We did get a small little teaser, another one of those big HBO trailers with a lot of the different shows. We were talking about Deadwood. There's the Deadwood movie. Sir Ezra and I are both excited about that. Some of the other shows like Veep, and I can't remember if Westworld was in that or not. I don't think it was, but we saw some new Game of Thrones footage. And right as we were getting ready to record Ravens, I was like, all right, stop, everybody, we got to talk about this. So we did. And we see a little bit of Arya and a dragon and the Unsullied in what looks to be Winterfell. So
yeah, it was actually pretty neat. Just her expression and the way she was receiving the dragons that were there, and we had a good discussion about the Unsullied and where they were last season and how they were getting here, and Lord Adam Parker and others had great thoughts on. Well, you were even bringing up, Sir Matt, about the idea that Dany and Jon meet Sansa. Does that happen at the end of the first episode? Does it happen at the beginning? Made us sort of question, what we were seeing there. But all seems like it was stuff from, I think Lord Adam Parker said this, that was in the beginning of the first 10 to 15 minutes maybe of the first episode is what they were kind of showing us there. So
yeah. So super exciting. Definitely go check that out. We're super excited for it.
Yeah,
it looks great. I can't wait. I'm ready for April. I'm in my rewatch right now. I'm in about season 3. I definitely got some plowing through to do. As we get closer here, but I'll be fine. I'll plow through it here in a bit. But yeah,
that's awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, do we have any other news or updates for anybody? I think we're pretty well.
I think we're
good. We got
pretty much caught up. Yeah.
T-shirts are out. We had some folks wearing the T-shirts. So that was kind of cool. Our patrons are sporting those, so that's exciting. We still have the public tee place where you can go buy some merch from us. So that'll be kind of cool.
I bought one actually. I was wearing it. Yeah, some good stuff there. So stay tuned for that for just more merch and what have you. And welcome again to all the new listeners that we have. We know we have a lot of different folks as we get closer to the show. We've been seeing a huge increase in listeners, and so we're happy to have you. Go check out the Facebook group, join in there, Bend the Knee, and have a good time. It's a lot of fun. So, yep. Absolutely. So, all right. I guess we're heading on over to the Maester Studies, Sir Ezra.
Yeah, we're jumping right into it, and this is another 50-page chapter. I mean,
that sounds about right.
It's unreal. So, I think we're going to start with just a. We'll have Sir Matt just sort of read here in the beginning, like as he always does, and then we'll hop around to some of the major takeaways. Is how we'll do it. We won't be able to cover everything, but that's okay. So
yeah, it's fine. The seeds of war are oft planted during times of peace. So has it been in Westeros. The bloody struggle for the Iron Throne, known as the Dance of Dragons, fought from 129 to 131 AC, had its roots half a century earlier during the longest and most peaceful reign that any of the Conqueror's descendants ever enjoyed, that of Jaehaerys I Targaryen, the Conciliator. The old king and good queen Alicent ruled together until her death in 100 AC. Aside from those, from 2 periods of estrangement known as the First and Second Quarrels, and produced 13 children. Four of them, 2 sons and 2 daughters, grew to maturity, married, and produced children of their own. Never before had the 7 kingdoms had been blessed, or cursed in the view of some, with so many Targaryen princelings. From the loins of the old king and his beloved queen sprang such a confusion of claims and claimants that many maesters believe that the Dance of Dragons or some similar struggle was inevitable.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the start of it all goes back here. So last week we were talking about good Queen Alicent and sort of her death and her passing there, but we have to kind of, so it like took us through her whole life, but then we go back to this issue of the heirs, and one of the things I think this is the second like divide between them, isn't it, Sir Matt? This is the second time where Jaehaerys and good Queen Alicent really disagreed on what to do.
Yep. Yeah.
And at first there is no, all is well because Prince Aemon, the Prince of Dragonstone, was set up. He's good to go. He was well liked by the people, and he is the heir apparent. At one point, they used the phrase, they had an heir and a spare. So they had Prince Aemon, and they also had Balon. So, we had the both of them very close brothers, loved each other, but unfortunately, in 92 AC, when Aemon, Prince of Dragonstone, he was slain on Tarth by a Mirish crossbow bolt loosed at the man beside him. So, yeah, he was just taken by a bolt and did not survive. He was there, helping to put down some revolt, and he's lost. And it's the king and queen mourn him. His brother almost more so. Prince Balon actually gathered his forces and went and avenged his brother by driving the Mirman into the sea. And on his return to King's Landing, Balon was hailed as a hero by cheering throngs and embraced by his father, the king, who named him Prince of Dragonstone and heir to the Iron Throne. Yeah. So, thank goodness we had the spare, right?
Yeah.
We have the spare.
Yeah.
But sometimes, you need an extra spare. Has it ever happened, Sir Matt? The one tire goes out, you get the spare, you put it on, and it's also flat, and now we're stuck.
Yes, I have actually been in that exact situation many times before. Yeah. So.
Oh man. So now they back up here a little bit. So, it was a popular decree. So you would think, right, that that's just the way of it. Think back to Aenys and Maegor, and when Aenys dies, the crown wasn't supposed to go to Maegor, was it?
No, it was not.
Right, it was to go to his son. So, so when Prince Aemon dies, it's like automatically he goes to now. If Prince Aemon had no children, then sure, it would go to Prince Balon immediately. That would be fine. He's the next eldest son, have you. But Prince Aemon had a child. His daughter, Rhaenys, born in 74 AC, had grown into a clever, capable, beautiful young woman. In 90 AC, at the age of 16, she had wed the king's admiral and master of ships, Corlys of House Valerion. So the sea snake, as we know him. And very well-known, prestigious guy. House Valerion's been around for a long time, big supporters of the Targaryens, and a very powerful family. So, but yeah, but it doesn't go to her. And I think that is sort of the issue, and good Queen Alicent is not happy about that. Corlys is not happy as well. Rhaenys is not happy either. So
yeah, none of them are happy.
Yeah, so it's he immediately there was no council, by the way, for that part. He just decides in 92 AC that this is the way it's going to be. It's going to go to Balon, no questions asked, and that's just what the king declared. And so that is sort of what causes this. that's the beginnings. It's crazy to think that that's the beginnings of the Dance of Dragons. Right there, that one move. Had he have declared Rhaenys the next heir apparent, well then we're good. I'm not so sure that Balon would have even argued with it, really, too much. It doesn't say that because he doesn't have the opportunity to. He's immediately kind of declared, but yeah. So by granting Dragonstone to Prince Balon, King Jaehaerys was not only passing over Rhaenys, but also possibly her unborn son. So she was making the claim that she was carrying a child, and that child would have been, possibly had to have a good claim to the throne as well. So her whole line, of Prince Aemon, is passed over. Actually, his son there. So that's a lot to take. I would say for that line there. So anyways, let's see.
That I'm looking at this here. Jaehaerys has 7 total heirs, right? That he names, right, as like his heirs. Yeah. Going on, and almost all of them end up dying all the way until the 7th one, who we'll get to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And that one he actually gives up to. That decision he gives to this Great Council that we're going to get to. That we've referenced it before, the Great Council of 101 AC, and it's really interesting, and actually a lot more details are kind of given here in Fire and Blood. Let's see. So, some of the things that were I guess pluses for Balon. He's a seasoned knight of 35. He's better suited for rule than an 18-year-old princess, Rhaenys, or her unborn babe, and so he was also very well beloved by the people. He's known as Balon the Brave, and again, these were two brothers who were super close, and it just seemed natural to say, yeah, this is they're close. We're going with this other brother who would have probably been Aemon's hand of the king, actually. During his reign. I think they were that close. And Balon actually is married to his sister, and they have, several kids, which we'll get to here in a second. So let me keep going on here just a little bit, though, so we can kind of keep this in order. Rhaenys herself was the first to raise objection. You would rob my son of his birthright, so we went over that. Let's see. Her husband, Corlys Velaryon, was so wroth that he gave up being admiral and his place in the small council, and took his wife back to Driftmark. So that's crazy. He's so upset that he leaves the small council. And again, this is the sea snake we're talking about. He'll play a major role going forward, and he already has been, a really faithful servant of House Targaryen. Lady Jocelyn of House Baratheon, Rhaenys' mother, was also angered, as was her formidable brother, Borman, Lord of Storm's End. So there's that. There's that connection. Her mother, Prince Aemon's wife, Lady Jocelyn of House Baratheon, is enraged too. So that's not good.
Yeah.
Let's see. Queen Alicent, as we mentioned, was one of the main dissenters. In the last years of her life, so talking about good Queen Alicent, she had, we talked about all the cruelties of losing her children, but then she also saw many. So she had great sorrows, but she also had some great joys as well. Just in seeing the various weddings. She was a big wedding planner. She arranged a lot of marriages, right?
Right.
Talked about that before. So her grace knew joys as well as sorrows during the same years. However, chief among them, her grandchildren. There were weddings as well. In 93 AC, she attended the wedding of Prince Balon's eldest son, Viserys, to Lady Emma. I think it's... of House Aaron, the 11-year-old child of the late Princess Dala. Yeah, their marriage was not consummated until the bride had flowered 2 years later. So, and that's actually important because, we're going to talk about Viserys here in just a little bit. So, she's talking about the wedding she's attended in 97 AC. The good queen saw Balon's second son, Daemon, take to wife Lady Ray of House Royce, heir to the ancient castle of Runestone in the Vale. So his second son, Daemon, is also a big player in the Dance of Dragons. And kind
of the first Daemon Targaryen. And the funny thing is that Daemon Targaryen and Daemon the second Daemon Targaryen who later changes his name to Daemon Blackfire. Their stories are so similar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. It really is. And actually, we'll get to him later in just a second, but because he's kind of a thorn in Viserys, his elder brother's side, and you wouldn't think that, because you just had two brothers,
right,
Aemon and Balon, who were super close, and you would assume Viserys and the second in line, Daemon, would be as well. And you start to see that it's actually an issue of the succession, really, is what causes some of the strife between these siblings.
Right.
So, yeah. Okay. So they hold some great tourney here, and that we'll kind of skip over some of that. But a fortnight after the tourney had ended, however, the king's old friend Septon Barth died peacefully in his sleep after serving ably as Hand of the King for 41 years. So we have to shout out to Septon Barth, who's played a major role in the old king's reign here and has done many great things for Westeros. So we haven't even highlighted all of them. He goes over to Essos at one point and has an epic conversation over there and tries to track down the dragon eggs and things. He's done a lot. So he passes away finally, and so Jaehaerys chose the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard to take his place. Sir Ryman Redwine was no Septon Barth, but his undoubted prowess with a lance proved of little use to him as Hand. So I don't know why he was he was he was
right.
just the next up as Hand. So there's that. Let's move on here a little bit. So here we go. So the Prince of Dragonstone. So Balon, is proclaimed the heir, right? So his grace had no choice but to remove. He turned to his son Balon to replace him. So he's wanting to replace Sir Ryman, just because he's no good, right? And Balon is set to become Hand of the King. He performed his duties admirably, though less scholarly than Septon Barth. The prince proved a good judge of men and surrounded himself with loyal subordinates and counselors. The realm would be well ruled when Balon Targaryen set the Iron Throne. Lords and the common folk agreed, right? So he's prepping, he's grooming, getting his son there, Balon, ready to go. So it was not to be, though. In 101 AC, Prince Balon complained of a stitch in his side whilst hunting in the Kingswood. The pain worsened when he turned to the city. His belly swelled and hardened, and the pain grew so severe it left him bedridden. The Grand Maester, kind of comes in there and tries to help him out. Right? Yeah. So, but on the 5th day of his illness, Prince Balon died in his bedchamber in the Tower of the Hand, with his father sitting beside him, holding his hand. After opening the corpse, Grand Maester found he put down the cause of death as a burst belly. So yeah. I don't know, just a stomach sickness there.
I mean, appendix bursting, maybe?
Yeah,
and maybe just not knowing what it was.
Yeah, that could be. I was trying to put my finger on it, but yeah, that's good. I like that. That could be what it is. So now he's, I mean, I don't know. Like you said, Sir Matt, he's gone through heir after heir, and they just keep dying. It's actually kind of a sad thing, and I think, Good Queen Alicent, talks about. It's often mentioned in Fire and Blood that just the loss of her children and how that weighed on her.
Right.
I mean, just to connect it to real life, anyone who no parent wants to outlive their child.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so you see he's got, his sons are dying in their prime, and it just, I don't know. It's hard for him to handle it and weighs on him. But this is why he decides, though, at this point, to hold the Council of 101 AC. Because, Balon has now also had several sons, okay? And they are having children. So it's like, you had... Aemon had kids, Rhaenys, and then she has a girl with Corlys Velaryon, and then later a boy. But then Balon has kids as well. So now, which grandkid gets it? Is it Rhaenys or Viserys? Which do you go back to Aemon's child, who is a female? Firstborn is a female, and the firstborn of Balon is a male. and this is where we've talked for a long while that this council ends up. We know how they decide. We know they decide to go with Viserys, but it is interesting, Sir Matt. Did you see this whole bit here about the where they held this council in Harrenhal and the number of lords that attended? It was it's crazy.
It's a big deal, and this is something that this great council is something that we talked about because it later on it forbids what's her name from becoming
Viserys' daughter.
Rhaenyra. That's a huge part of the Dance of Dragons because she feels she should have it. It's also something that could come back up. It's never mentioned in the show. That's why Cersei's like Mad Queen, in the show. Right. But that may be something that if they try to go that Mad Queen route in the books, which they probably will, if that's brought up by anyone, because that's something that could essentially hinder Daenerys. Right? Is that it's law. You're not allowed to have a queen. So,
right. Yeah. This precedent's already been kind of
set. Right.
Set. Right. Right. So yeah. I mean that's that. It's but there's they chose Harrenhal. I thought this was interesting just to give you a scale. They thought anywhere from like 300 great lords might attend. They wanted the great lords of the realm to come and sit down, and Jaehaerys he knew that whichever side he chose, there would be a fight. Because
absolutely.
Yeah, Rhaenys and Corlys are he's got his ships, he's amassing ships out there on Driftmark, and then you had Daemon at first, who is brother to Viserys, is gathering men, a host of men to defend his brother's claim for the throne, So that's interesting, I think, because later on, I guess he's still, he's hooking up with his brother's daughter, but he's still helping out, I guess, in that regard. So yeah, let's move on a little bit, but just the amount of men who showed up, the Starks were there, the Lannisters, you name the house, they were there. Back to last week, Sarah Targaryen, her bastard sons show up, So that was interesting. You had a lot of different contenders. So they kind of weed through a lot of these different folks. At one point, this is a neat little connection here. Jaehaerys turns to after Balon dies, he turns to Archmaester Vaegon, and Vaegon was his son. Vaegon, you remember, was very bookish and just didn't get along, kind of peeved a lot of people, and was sent off to the Citadel and is an Archmaester now. And when the old king summoned him back, summoning his last son to King's Landing, what passed between them remains a matter of dispute. Some say the king offered Vaegon the throne and was refused. Others assert that he only sought his counsel. Reports had reached the court that Corlys Velaryon was massing ships and men on Driftmark to defend the rights of his son, Laenor, which is the second-born, by the way, whilst Daemon Targaryen, a hot-tempered and quarrelsome young man of 20, had gathered his own band of sworn swords to support his brother Viserys. A violent struggle for succession was likely, no matter who the old king named to succeed him. No doubt that was why his grace seized eagerly on the solution offered by Archmaester Vaegon. So some are saying that, like, well, instead of going with either one of these, why don't I do what I did before, which was just go to my next son, So I went with it was Aemon, then Balon, and now let's go with Vaegon, So that was his way to try to kind of
right.
Yeah. So all right. So yeah, it was decided that the council would be held at Harrenhal, as we said. Largest, over 500 lords and their tails attended. Let's see, more than 1,000 lords. Oh wait. So I'm sorry. So no one knew how many lords would come, since no such council had ever been held before. But it was thought prudent to have room for at least 500 lords. But more than 1,000 lords attended. It took half a year for them to assemble. So, I think before, when we talk about the Great Council, we think of it just, 20, 50 men. I mean, it was like huge. I don't know how it was organized. They didn't really get into the details of it.
It's a big deal. They meet for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Like it's, 9. it discussed and dismissed 9 lesser claims.
Right. Yep.
There's a lot to sift through here.
Right. So some of the funnier claims that come up. So someone comes in, and a strapping red-haired man at arms who claimed to be the bastard son of Maegor the Cruel shows up. So a lot of bastards show up, really. Someone showed up and claimed to be Jaehaerys' true-born son. Well, not true-born, but bastard-born son, I guess, and saying that his he was arrested actually, for making that claim. Jaehaerys, quashed that. I mean, no one's ever really questioned that Jaehaerys was unfaithful to good Queen Alicent. That never has come up, and so to hear that come up in the council was kind of like, oh wow. I mean, he resisted Rhaegar Baratheon's, what were they? Those handmaidens that he sent to Dragonstone when they were super, super young. As far as we know, he resisted them, and so I don't know. I feel like Jaehaerys was a good, faithful husband, and to have this person step up here and say they were his son is like, what? Who are you? So that was kind of interesting. That little bit that came up. So yeah, and Sarah doesn't come back. By the way, Sarah sends her 3 bastard sons, and she herself has a better claim than they do, but she kind of says she has her own kingdom to rule. So she didn't show up, and I kind of thought she would. When I was first started reading this, I thought, oh yeah, she'll show back up and want a piece of the pie. But really, she just sends her sons. Maybe just to remind everyone that she's still there, and that whole piece. So So they narrow it down though. They actually dismiss Rhaenys Targaryen. So. It's crazy. I thought it would come down to Rhaenys Targaryen and Viserys Targaryen, right? And it kind of does a little bit, but then really they are putting forward Lenore Velaryon, so that's her son, the son of Princess Rhaenys, and the grandson of Jaehaerys, which is the grandson of Prince Aemon. Sorry, not to confuse folks. Let me back up here. Lenore Velaryon is the son of Princess Rhaenys and grandson of Prince Aemon. Okay, so there we go. Mm-hmm. And this, so that's one person we have, and then we have the grandson of Jaehaerys and the son of Balon. So those are the 2 that we whittle it down to. And it's like the 16-year-old boy versus, I forget how old Viserys is. He's older though, isn't he? 30s and 40s or something like that, I think. And that was part of why, the council kind of decided to go with him. Also, it was mentioned that Viserys was the last to ride Balerion. Though after the death of the Black Dread in 94 AC, he never mounted another dragon again, whereas the boy Lenore had yet to take his first flight upon his young dragon, a splendid gray and white beast he named Sea Smoke. And we'll, see more from Sea Smoke later. But I just thought, it's interesting that we came down to those 2 and not actually, because you have a great grandson and then you have a grandson who are up for the crown here versus a granddaughter and a grandson. They completely dismiss any female, any females who have a claim. So that's why if you look at Prince Aemon's line, he had to go to his great grandson. Right. So
and the idea that it can no longer also pass to, whereas it's they established a precedent that matters of succession cannot pass to a woman or a male descendant of a woman.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it's like, oh, it's still the king's grandson, as you're kind of saying there, boom, can't matter. So that's something that it's not something that we really see, but it's something that could be interesting.
Yeah. Later on. Yeah, for sure. And I think that is sort of the last little bit. There's obviously some tension there between those 2 families, and it's just kind of they should be I don't know, more content, but this is what, as the chapter started to say, this is the start of the Dance of Dragons, and this will come up later.
Yeah, it all starts right here, and trust me, this is what we'll be on for the next 2 months. So Dance of Dragons is huge, and it's a big deal, and we get to break it down. But this is really the seeds that starts it.
Yep. Well, and actually, basically, the theme I got from this was that, like, if you don't have a male heir, it just gets tricky. You know, it's like, if you don't have a son, then all of a sudden the question comes up again. Because really, to kind of skim through the other 40 pages we have here, Viserys, that's the issue. That's what starts to be the issue, is that, you know, his daughter, you know, he ends up actually going against. I mean, he wants her to be the heir apparent, right? You know, I mean, this is all stuff that we kind of covered in what was that? The Rogue Prince? Was that the?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So it's her name is Rhaenyra, by the way, and so Princess Rhaenyra, and she was the one who, if you remember, she was always taken to court with her father. You know, was doted on. Everyone, you know, was the realm's delight. I mean, everyone really enjoyed her. And Viserys' younger brother, Prince Daemon Targaryen, considered himself his brother's heir and coveted the title of Dragonstone. So there's that whole bit where I said at first Daemon Targaryen super supports his brother to get the claim. Once he gets it, now he realizes, well, going off of what they said in 101 AC, Viserys does not have a male heir. So he considers himself to be next in line. And it's actually Viserys Targaryen the First who says he wants his daughter to be his heir, flat out. In his first marriage, you know, his first wife died. Lady Arryn dies. And he ends up, what is her name? Alicent Hightower, I think, you know, becomes his next wife. And that was, again, Alicent Hightower is going back to the whole, you know, Sir Otto Hightower and those guys, you know, possibly keeping Sarah Targaryen, you know, and Alicent Hightower looking a lot like a Targaryen. We had talked about that whole rumor and theory that, you know, she may have some, you know, Targaryen blood in her. Is interesting. But anyways, so that's kind of the rest of this chapter. It starts to talk about, you know, how Viserys just doted on his daughter and had Rhaenyra declared the heir and princess of Dragonstone in response to his ungrateful brother's ambitions. Hundreds of lords and landed knights did, you know, swear solemn oaths to defend her right of succession. Daemon left the capital in a fury, and Viserys began to groom Princess Rhaenyra to be the ruling queen, teaching her how to rule and make her a part of the small council. Problem, though, and I'm kind of really just flashing through this real quick, is his second marriage and having a son. And then the realm starts to say, well, wait a second. You know, why did we have this great council where 1,000 lords showed up and said, this is how we're going to set a precedent and this is what we're going to do. And the very next king, the king who we actually chose, by the way, Viserys, is going to disrupt that, you know, right away. He disrupts it because he doesn't want it to go to his brother. And then, you know, anyways, and his brother sort of, this is what I brought up, you know, the idea that, like, the siblings keep getting, the strife happens because the more children that Rhaenys has, Rhaenyra has, and the more children that Viserys has in his second marriage, the further Daemon Targaryen is pushed away from becoming the, you know, ruler, you know, or king, you know. So he was obsessed with it. You know, he eventually becomes the what is he? The Matt? He's the oh my gosh, is he the king of the Stepstones or something like that? Isn't he?
Right. Yeah.
So he's an ambitious guy.
And to me, the Dance of the Dragons also sets. To me, I view it as it also sets up the Blackfyre rebellions because it gives it precedent, and it also gives claim to this idea of choosing a king, right? Like choosing who the heir is going to be, because that's what the people decide they kind of want. Because you get all the people saying, well, Daemon Blackfyre, you know, Daemon Targaryen, Daemon Blackfyre, should be king. He's way more of a king than Darren the Good, right? And so all of that, even you could also point to the Dance of the Dragons as we start it here, is what sets it up, where you get these kind of factions. That's what we're going to be talking about next week. Yeah. Next week's chapter is the blacks and the greens.
Right. Exactly.
And you know, that same type of a thing.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I don't know that there's much more here that we need to cover in this, just only because it's things that are covered in the Rogue Prince. Now there's some different
Mm-hmm.
stuff. There are some tidbits you do need to. I'm not saying to skip this by any means as a reader. Sir Kristen Cole is a big deal, and his relationship, with Rhaenyra. I mean, it's all really cool stuff, and it's things that maybe what we'll do is next week, we could do even a part 2 of this, and kind of I could summarize it just a little bit for folks, because there's just more details on Daemon Valerian. It is the Rogue Prince, right, Sir Matt? I mean, it is like
Yes.
he is. It's his ambition and how he's trying to sway Rhaenyra and teach her the the arts of. He seduces her a little bit, right? So yeah, and we'll talk more about Corlys Valerian and what he's got going on and the animosity that he has just because his son was overlooked, and that kind of sticks with him for a long while, and that'll kind of determine which side he lands on when we talk about the greens and the blacks. So. Anything else though you wanted to mention, Sir Matt? Just in I think
no. I think we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, it's mostly the Great Council. That's like the big kind of takeaway from this chapter and what it sets up for going forward. From there. So.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, we'll leave that there,
right,
and then we'll move on.
Yeah, let's go ahead and head on over to our reread. Last week we were in Arya 4. That's where Arya was training with Syrio Forel. It was interrupted by Sir Meryn Trant. Meryn demands Arya come with him. Syrio sees something odd and fights the guards. Arya escapes. She goes and finds a needle and kills a stable boy before escaping in the dungeons of the Red Keep. Yep. And Sir Ezra and I talked a little bit about Raven's Nest, that chapter last week, that kind of that follow-up. So if you guys... from last week, there are some things we were doing some research on the Is Syrio Alive thing that we talked a little bit about in the Raven's Nest episode. So be sure to check that out. Kind of a follow-up to last week. This week, we're in Sansa 4. Last time we were with Sansa, she was wondering with Jane Poole why her father did not send Sir Loras to kill the Mountain. The next day, her father had revealed that he was sending her and Arya back to Winterfell. Sansa says she can't leave because she has to marry Prince Joffrey, who is nothing like his father, and he will give her children, give him children with golden hair, and this is a big breakthrough for Lord Eddard.
Yeah,
and set us kind of to the events where we're at now, where Sansa is locked in a room with Jane Poole, who does nothing but cry for her father. Sansa, thinking Jane was acting childish, told her friend that she would ask Queen Cersei to let her see her father, but it does not seem to have helped. Yeah. And then I think this chapter ends with a certain letter being kind of realized, written up here. So big deal going forward. So, all right, man. The first line on this chapter is like heartbreaking. Just the opening sentence. Yeah, they came for Sansa on the third day. She chose a simple dress of dark gray wool, plainly cut but richly embroidered around the collar and sleeve. Her fingers felt thick and clumsy as she struggled with the silver fastenings without the benefit of servants. Jane Poole had been confined with her, but Jane was useless. Her face was puffy from all her crying, and she could not seem to stop sobbing about her father.
Mm-hmm. Dude, I tell you, I feel terrible for Jane Poole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like just knowing what happens going forward and the decisions that are made about her here, it is just awful. And one of the big themes in this chapter is just seeing how naive Sansa is, and I really don't even blame her. It's just this can't be real. This is a nightmare, right? This can't be happening. So, and I used to think, Sir Matt, that when I first read this and I was reading through it, I thought, doggone it, Sansa, you're part of the reason that all this stuff happened, to Eddard. But really, that's not necessary. It was she only
It's
went.
not. It's
not. It's not really. She happened to go just several hours beforehand. It didn't really, this was already. Things were going to go forward in this direction. If anything, Sansa might have escaped or something different could have happened with her. But Eddard's fate is, it wouldn't have changed anything, I guess, is what I want to say. So, but yeah, okay. So one of the things, you talk about the weeping and the servants won't talk to her. The guards won't talk to her. No one's telling her what's going on, and that's kind of reminds me of Ariane in Dorne when she gets locked up in her tower, and just no one will speak. That it can break a person. It absolutely can break someone, and that's I mean, it's only 3 days, so it wasn't that long, but still, you're just like, you're left not knowing. She heard all the fighting, and she says, she's heard fighting before, right? She's heard it in the yard her whole life. But there was something different about this, now we hear the groans and the grunts of pain and, just different men suffering. And they don't tell you about how the knights will cry out, for help when they're being struck or struck down.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Which is, sad.
Yeah, and I'm with you too. I mean, Sansa. This is really where the Sansa story for me kind of starts. Is like, okay, everything that you kind of thought was going to happen isn't. And much like a lot of the characters, they get kind of the short end of the stick. Really, you know, like she was supposed to be married to Joffrey, not of her choosing, right? And then she's kind of realizes how great it'll be. And then, man, everything just seems to go wrong. And this is where her kind of story really starts. And, where she becomes basically a prisoner. I mean, Sansa's basically a prisoner for until where we reach her in the books.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so where else should we go here? Because should we talk about the part where she slips away from Septa Mordain, right? She never felt so. What's the word? Ashamed of the treachery, I guess. Just disobeying her father to this extent, right? She wants to go seek out the king, but she's afraid of the king. So she seeks out the queen. Gosh, if we could just reach through, and tell her like not a good idea. But she doesn't know it, and Cersei does her job well, and is very manipulates her quite a bit. So I do want to back up just 1 second before we go on to that, because I found something that was kind of interesting. A character that I have never looked up much, but today stood out to me was Sir Mandon Moore, who is the one that's described as having a dead face. And it just took me off guard for a second, and I was like, wait, what? He has a dead face. He's got these pale gray eyes. And they describe his face as lifeless. And I just thought it was kind of funny. It turns out that he's actually,
a faceless man. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Face. That's what I was going for. But he ends up being a pretty just ruthless, guy. He comes up again in A Clash of Kings and later on. But, we don't really spend a lot of time. We don't get to know these other Kingsguard very well. And he was one that popped up that I was like, who is this guy? Because we were talking about how Barristan Selmy and even Jaime talk about these other members of the Kingsguard like they're a joke, or that they're
they do.
They're
they do.
unworthy.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. So one of the things that is mentioned by Jaime Lannister too, as I was doing some research, is Jaime Lannister considers Mandon dangerous, as his face does not give away his intentions. They mention his face just several times. Maybe it's just something about. Sansa thinks he has a curiously dead face. Going down a rabbit hole here. So, he ends up, eventually, I don't want to, it doesn't really matter, I guess. He ends up dying. And one of the things Jaime, when he's looking at the White Book, is trying to update it, thinking about his death.
That's actually that's a really cool chapter, actually.
Yeah.
Where Jaime, I think, it's in A Storm of Swords, I think.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, where when Jaime finally gets back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's updating the book, and he has that kind of council meeting with them. That's actually a pretty cool chapter.
Right. Yeah. Yep. So it's one of the things here. So, and just to go on a tangent with this guy, in case any, I kind of like when a character comes up like this that we can kind of talk about for just a second, and then we'll get back to Sansa. He ends up being one of those guys, because you and I were talking, I think it was just in Raven's Nest, about the knights, the Kingsguard, who are, facing down Tyrion, who actually try to kill him. He prepares to stab him in the throat. Podrick pushes Mandon into the Blackwater, where he sinks under the weight of his armor and drowns.
Yeah.
So yeah, Tyrion has a nightmare about the wildfire, the wildfire in Mandan's assassination attempt. After waking, Tyrion thinks that Mandan has what was bribed by Cersei to kill him during the battle. Podrick is ashamed to have caused Mandan's death, but Tyrion praises Pod and instructs his squire to keep silent about Mandan. So it's interesting what will be written in the White Book, about him, and that he's this dangerous guy that Podrick kills. But hey, maybe the Drowned God, raises him again. If he's a faceless man, then who knows? Sorry, I just went on a crazy tangent there, but I love when I stumble across a character that I don't remember, and I'm like, who is this guy? And then you just start digging, and you're like, what the heck? What all role did he play? And it just was interesting because you brought up the Bronn situation with Sir Meryn Trant and his, facing him, and the idea that he, we were talking about Syrio Forel and how, anybody could beat Sir Meryn, So
yeah.
These guys just weren't, I don't know, they were just, they're kind of like just a gang. They're just they're ruthless. They're just completely, they have no honor, a lot of them. So anyways, I just wanted to bring that up as just, cool connection, I guess, right in the middle of the chapter. So let's move on, though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just because Robert, probably Robert Baratheon is accused of, putting people in the Kingsguard who he just thinks are funny or likes them or whatever. So
yeah, and also I bet he lets Cersei. I mean, I bet Jaime and those guys. I mean, I don't know. I feel like some of that might be some of their doing. Pushing White Cloaks in on him that are not as loyal and honorable ones that they can bribe. I mean, if they can bribe this guy to kill Tyrion, who is Hand of the King at the time, it's just crazy. They're all servants of Cersei, and probably sharing her bed too. So, anyways,
okay,
all right. So yeah, the bells are ringing though, right? The bells are ringing, and that's that indication that the king is dead. Sansa doesn't know it, but that has to be what it is,
right.
So she almost knows before. It's amazing how much she doesn't know. She doesn't know that he was, hurt on the hunting trip. She doesn't know all these things that we had just learned from Eddard. So perspective is really important, and it just shows that she's, she remembers her teachings, and Septim Mordain taught her well, and her courtesies, right? She still smiles at the knights as they are, escorting her to the queen. So
yeah.
Let's see. Let's go here. Let's go next to where they found Queen Cersei in the council chamber, seated at the head of the long table, littered with papers and candles, blocks of sealing wax. Sir Boros brings her in and says, "Your Grace, I've brought the girl." Sansa had hoped Joffrey might be there with her. Her prince was not there, but 3 of the king's counselors were. Lord Peter Baelish sat on the queen's left, Grand Maester Pycelle at the end of the table, while Lord Varys hovered over them, smelling flowery. So what I note in a lot of this is that Sir Barristan Selmy is not around, and it might be I just have not read past this chapter recently, but it's his association with maybe the words that he said, those are the king's words when she tore the paper. Remember that,
yeah,
when
because Barristan Selmy, is
honorable
like
guy.
An honorable guy, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, okay, so yeah, and this is where she gets the weird vibe from Peter Baelish. Peter's just,
he gives a lot. He gives a lot of weird vibes.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he does. But she felt as if he was looking at her without any clothes on or something, right? Isn't that what he says?
Yeah.
Or she says, yeah.
Right, she says, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and at first they're really, you can almost see this that they're super busy and they're making arrangements. Cersei wasn't aware that they put the steward's girl with Sansa. So this ought to be clue number 1 once she realizes that they were trying to keep people away from her, and they're trying to keep her. They don't want any other influences around or anyone to, they call it upsetting her, but really, they don't want her to know anything. You know, that they want to keep her in the dark as much as they can and manipulate her.
Right.
So, yeah, this is where they decide to give Jane Poole, though, over to Lord Peter, or Petire, however you want to say it.
Yeah. Yeah. Petire. Yeah, that's how. Well, Roy Dotrice says Petire.
I love it. I go back and forth in my head all the time.
Yeah, I think he goes back and forth too. Just a
he
little
does.
bit, you know.
He does. Yeah. So, but Sansa wants to know is she well, and she doesn't get scared up until that point where she realizes that, they're keeping something from her, and why not just send her straight to her father? Why does she have to go through, Baelish?
Right. She doesn't. Yeah, she doesn't. Yeah, she doesn't understand.
Right.
Cersei doesn't. Cersei doesn't understand what's going on and why, and
right,
because they don't really tell her a lot.
Right, and
this is really where they start just using her as a pawn. I mean, she's basically just used as a pawn from this point until until she escapes.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, it is. Yep, and but the one clue that we get here and we know this will be significant later is the look that Peter Baelish gives to Sansa, and he also makes a comment that she's, the spitting image of her mother in her youth, right? So Sansa, here we go. Something about the way the small man, being Peter Baelish, looked at her made Sansa feel as though she had no clothes on. Goosebump pimples on her skin. Sweet Sansa, Queen Cersei said, laying a soft hand on her wrist. Such a beautiful child. I do hope you know how much Joffrey and I love you. And that just takes her breath away. You do. Both of you love me. And that's that, because there was a little bit of strife between her and Joffrey, and Arya throwing Lion's Tooth into the river.
Yeah.
So, but now they have to inform her that her father's a traitor. And she may have traitor's blood. So what are we going to do with that? We obviously, she's got traitor's blood. We can't let her marry Joffrey, can we?
Joffrey. Right, and this is where Sansa really, she starts freaking out because they're, she's like, wait, what? Like, she's like, it's Varys who says, your father's a traitor, dear. And she's like, no, he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't do that. There's got to be a mistake. Like, please.
Yeah.
Like, this betrayal would have broken his heart, like all of this stuff.
Right.
And she's like, how can, she's like, but I love him. She's like, and what does that mean to her? What have they done to her father? There's a lot going on here.
Right. Well, one quick thing too, Maester Pycelle, remember the chapter where he's sitting with King Robert, and he swears in front of Pycelle to take care of his children, but as a thought, he thinks to himself, his true-born children. He thinks to himself that, yes, I'll make this promise, but it's to protect your bastards, to take care of Maya.
Gendry, right.
Yeah, exactly. And all Pycelle heard was, well, look at this. This is so treacherous. He swore to protect him, and the next thing you know, he's trying to, proclaim that Stannis Baratheon is the one true king. So that just is. And actually, ironically, he did try to protect those children too, right? Because he's telling Cersei, get out of here. I'm giving you a chance. Flee to the free cities. Get out of here, and we'll spare you. Get out of the way. So it's kind of crazy. She because she was risking. Let's say he's successful, she could be risking her children's lives.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And so she must have been very confident in her plan and who she knew. And she's been in King's Landing way longer. She knows Peter Baelish and these other lords and can play the game better. So, all right, where do we go from here, my friend? Let's see.
Well, I think this is where you're gonna get into more of the conversation with like Sansa and and the Queen. Like, this is where Sansa's telling her that, like, she loves Joffrey, right? And this is like, this poor child, murmured Varys, a love so true and innocent. Your grace would be a cruel to deny it, and yet what can we do? Her father stands condemned.
Yeah.
And then you have Grey Maester Pycelle. A child born of traitor seed will need to find that betrayal that naturally comes to her.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
And so this is where you really get all of the kind of the crow, like the crows, like are just kind of like, right, sitting around her, just kind of getting their chimes in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. And it all kind of comes to, you can see them just move her back and forth, and any time that she starts to say, can I see my father, or that he wouldn't do this type of thing. They say things like, you disappoint me, child. I thought you would be such a good, companion for Joffrey. Joffrey is that carrot that they dangle out there.
Absolutely. Well, it's to get her to, and it's to get her to do something. They're like, well, they're building the suspense, which is what they are, want to do, because eventually they're going to drop it on her. Like, well, prove to us your loyalty.
Yeah.
Right. As we get to the point at the end of the chapter where it's like, write the letter.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yep. And that's unfortunate. So she writes many letters. She ends up writing to her brother Robb, her mother, her grandfather, Hoster Tully, who she doesn't know very well. And it actually is a kind of a made me stop and think for a moment, just that like these marriages and alliances and like how important your grandfather could be, even though you don't maybe know him as well. It was just interesting that's her, because she doesn't really know that side of her family all that well.
No, she doesn't. She doesn't. She really doesn't.
Yeah, and that actually comes to a head later when we talk about just, the Blackfish and her uncles, her great uncles and her uncle, Edmure Tully. It's interesting. That's a place of refuge. They could go there and present themselves, and they know that, they would be treated fairly. And I'm sure their grandfather in his prime and in good health would help them. But right now we know he's not in good health. And that really Edmure Tully is going to be the one reading that letter that she sends.
Well, actually, at this point, I mean, we
don't
know,
really
but
know.
in the story, you wouldn't know, right? Because you don't really run into it.
Yeah, the only thing that came up before this was Catelyn Tully when she's, I think, Edmure Tully is the one who writes. Where does he send that letter? Because she took Tyrion, and then like the Lannister men are moving on to the border of Riverrun, and he's dealing with it, and I think she's
right.
So there's a hint, but yeah, you're right. I mean, we know it, but like at this point, yeah, she's sending that to her grandfather, there in Riverrun. Mm-hmm. So, let's see. Yeah, so she answers Robb. The queen patted her hand. We will tell you what to write, child. The important thing is that you urge Lady Catelyn and your brothers to keep the king's peace. It will go hard for them if they don't, said Grand Maester Pycelle. By the love you bear them, you must urge them to walk the path of wisdom. And she actually wants them to, in the letter, I think she instructs that they come to King's Landing and bend the knee, Mm-hmm. And that's sort of... To prove that there is no treason, and then if after that's done, clearly then we'll see that you don't have traitor's blood, and that it is just a one-off thing with your father, and we can look past that. And to Sansa's defense, she's thinking this whole time, okay, if I'm married to Joffrey, even if they exile father, even if they imprison him for a time being, she thinks that Joffrey's merciful. And it's actually probably pretty smart that they didn't have Joffrey in the room, because he's not the best actor. I mean, he can put on the face, but it's hard. I think he would betray a hint of like a smirk. He enjoys seeing her in this position, and he's just not a good actor. So they keep him away from her until she writes these letters and plays her part the way they need her to. So
right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, he would ruin the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now that he's king, he's probably not there because he doesn't care. He could care less.
Right. Yeah. He's probably strutting around the Iron Throne, just chest out, thinking this is mine. He's just such a. Oh, right, I don't know. Yeah. It's so crazy. Dweeb goes to his head. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a slouch. That's for sure. He's a slouch.
He is a slouch. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, so and then this is where she says, by then, she's talking about the exile, and if he's exiled for several years, by then she'll be married to Joffrey, she'll be the queen, she could persuade him to bring her father back and grant him a pardon, but only if Mother or Robb did, don't do anything treasonous, she's like, she's thinking they may call the banners and refuse to swear fealty or anything, and it would all go wrong. So, she's concerned that they'll do that, and so she's like, I'll write the letters, and... they get right down to it, and she sends one to Lady Lysa Arryn, of the Erie as well, Hoster Tully of River Run, as we said. So Varys helps her seal it. They took his seal off of him, and and they seal it with a direwolf of House Stark. Yep. So sad part here, though. Back to Jane Poole. Just when she returns, all of her things are gone. Sir Mandon Moore returns Sansa to the High Tower of Maegor's Holdfast, which is interesting. We've talked about Maegor's Holdfast, and maidens being held there, and there she is, Sansa.
Right. And the last line too. It was not until later that night that she was drifting off to sleep that she realized she hadn't even thought about asking about Arya.
Yep.
Yeah, so there's that part to it as well.
So sad. So yeah, I mean, and the part that I was bringing up earlier was that although she went to the Queen, I don't know. I mean, I think there were probably instructions not obviously to kill the Stark girls because you want them as hostages. You're trying to take them alive, so that still would have happened. But she would have seen all that brutality, and she would have seen them trying to. It might have changed actually the way she approached this if she would have been in Arya's position and seen a Kingsguard, and Lannister men show up and kill the men protecting her and take her by force. So it's interesting that this happens the way it does, because then she's less likely to, I guess, I don't know what the word is. She trusts the Queen more still, because she didn't see any of it. She heard it, and Jane Poole did see it, and she is just bawling her eyes out.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So, real quick tangent, by the way, on Jane Poole, just because I like her, I like that character actually, and it's a sad story with her, because Peter Baelish says that he'll find a place for her, right? He says that he'll take care of her, and so it's actually I think it's in a Storm of Swords, right, where she is. There's this northern girl who is present, who claims to be Arya Stark, although Jaime does not recognize her. The girl who is hollow-eyed and skinny, wears a gray dress and a gray cloak with white satin trim, and so in case Brienne has the idea of rescuing the girl, Jaime tells Brienne that she is not Arya, but some northern girl found by his father, Lord Tywin. They pin a wolf sigil on her and send her north to wed Lord Roose Bolton's legitimized bastard Ramsay, as we know. So there's all that.
What do you think's going to happen with Jane Poole?
Dude, I don't know. In what's his name? Gosh, Theon ends up recognizing that and knows what's happening there, and he rescues her, right? So that's a great question. I know in Winds of Winter, that's because I just started reading this, so spoiler for everybody, because I don't want to get yelled at, because we have some folks who have not read any of it, but they come across, I think, a character called Mors Umber, I think, is who Crow's Food. There it is. All right, I just looked it up. Crow's Food. And he asked Jane questions about the castle to confirm her identity, names of servants, all these things that she would know. And I think I can't remember if she continues to play on as Arya for her own safety. If she's Arya Stark, she is going to be protected. You know what I'm saying? She's going to be treated right.
Nobody's going to try to attack her, kill her because she's a valuable commodity. Right.
Yes, exactly. Let's see. Yeah, he decides. I think Stannis says here. Yeah. So again, major spoilers. I'm sorry. Just turn it off if you don't want to hear this. This is just one of the chapters in Winds, and I loved it. I read it just literally 2 weeks ago. And Stannis decides to send, air quote, Arya to the Wall to reunite with her brother Jon Snow, tasking Sir Justin Massey with bringing Jane to Castle Black with an escort of 6 men and Alysanne Mormont. So that's where she's headed. Whether she gets there or not, I don't know. You remember Melisandre has that vision, right, of a girl coming to Jon Snow, and they think it's Arya, and it actually ends up being that Karstark girl. And so he treats her right. Well, I mean, now, air quote, and Arya is coming north as well here, It just happens to be Jane Poole.
It's Jane Poole.
Yeah, I hope something good happens to her, because One of the things they mention in this chapter is that Valen Pool, when Sansa's thinking about him, she's like, he doesn't even wear a sword. He never wears a sword. He's not a men-at-arms. He is a steward, and he is a bookkeeper, and he, is an organizer, and he keeps the count of all of their clothing, their stocks. When they pack up, he's the run with the checklist, making sure everything is good to go, and so he runs everything. To think they would kill him really kind of puts Sansa on edge a little bit. Like, this is bad, that's not right. I guess in a sense, they killed everybody, even men who weren't armed. Just because they were with, Eddard Stark. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll keep tabs on Jane Poole, because I've always, she has a terrible time with Ramsay, and Theon knows her and takes good care of her. And that's part of what brings him back a little bit in my eyes, is his treatment of her and the way that he handles that situation and tries to help her out. So, because Abel and all those guys, air quote, Mance, are trying to help her out and things. It's a cool little. It's surprising that a character like that is in Game of Thrones, goes away for so long, and then comes back in A Dance of Dragons, and is a big deal, and is someone that we're seeking after, and who is called Arya Stark. It's just. That's just crazy to think that she's here. This is where she leaves our story, and she doesn't come back for a long time. So, books later, Sir Matt, like books later. She's mentioned.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like she's mentioned.
She is mentioned. She's mentioned a lot in like passing thoughts of Sansa and some other people.
Right.
Yeah.
But she's gone, and no one knows what happened to her until Jaime kind of sees her and just warns Brienne, and then boom, next thing you know, she's with Ramsay Bolton. So, gosh. All right, well, hey, let's see here. So I think that was it for the chapter this week, and we've kind of gone over the cool connections there. I feel like the Jane Poole connection, the dead face.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
Those are all I really had. And unfortunately, our Ravens, we just did Raven's Nest.
Yeah, we were about empty on Ravens.
Yeah,
so.
and we just decided, since we just hopped off there and with all those folks, that we would just we'll kind of table Send a Raven at this point in time. But we're going to need some. I think we were talking about Raven's Nest being maybe at the end of March, March 24th. And I think right now, between Sir Matt and I, we've decided that that's close to the show. And we may have a trailer by then. And we'd like to discuss show theories, just thoughts on what we think is going to happen. So feel free to send us a Raven about the show and your theories, who lives, who dies, all of those type of cool things, some of the prophecies, how are they going to come to,
right,
ahead there. And send those Ravens to btkcast at gmail.com, and we'll read them there. And even if you aren't on our one of our bannermen or what have you there, a sworn sword, we'll still read some of your Ravens there, and we'll discuss them with our bannermen, and then you can hear that on the podcast. So it's definitely another way to be involved and participate. So,
yeah, absolutely. So,
all
right, man. Well, that's kind of it for us this week. You want to man the wall here, Sir Ezra?
Yeah, let's. We'd like to give a shout out to all of our bannermen, those who have helped us out in Raven's Nest and support us. And without these folks, we couldn't do it without them. I mean, Sir Matt and I, we do need help with equipment. We travel to conventions. Sir Matt just went to a Comic-Con Wizarding World, convention that we talked about at the top of the show, and because of your kindness and generosity, it's cool. We get to go out there and potentially meet new folks, interview people. You got some cool stickers and stuff. Some merch that we can share.
Super cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like that's. It's about that, like I've always said, writing a review, participating in the Facebook group, sending a Raven. Those are all ways to support us. But if you can man the wall and help us out, and you want to be involved in Raven's Nest, then go sign up as a bannerman or a sworn sword, and you can really get involved there. Our bannermen
every month. I mean, as we get further on, like if you're going to become like a new patron or something, you get access to all the stuff.
Oh yeah, all
That's
of it. Yeah.
There. It's not like oh, you just get that month stuff. It's like, oh wow, there's like 20 podcasts on here. So
yeah, exactly. And we have more musings coming up this week that Sir Matt and I are going to work on, and those have been fun. And I have been, just as a warning, reading the Winds of Winter chapters because I am just, that's where my mind's at, is at the end of Dance of Dragons and Winds of Winter. So I will tell you, I'll put a Winds spoiler there for any folks who didn't want to read that, because I know years ago or last year I hadn't read them, and so we were getting emails from Ghost of Harrenhal, and I was like, what is this?
Right. And something we've been thinking about doing is a feast. Is it a Feast of Dragons?
A Feast of Dragons.
Is that what you call it? Yeah. So that is a reread. That's a way to reread a Feast for Crows and a Dance with Dragons, because they take place at roughly the same time.
Yep.
Some things kind of go back and forth, and some things there's some chapters, like we've talked about before, the first John chapter and I think the first Sam chapter. The first John chapter of A Dance with Dragons and the first Sam chapter in A Feast of Crows are the same events, but through different perspectives.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of cool. And this is a breakdown of, like, somebody put this together and said, this is the order you should read it.
Yeah.
So
I want to give a shout out to Brendan Beefish.
Yeah, Brendan Beefish. It's both books, but it's put into an order that makes a lot of sense. And you've been going through it, Sir Ezra, and you said this makes way more sense.
Oh, it's so cool. And I think if you're worried about the pace on that, it would be a faster pace. We might do an overall discussion of the first 5 chapters in that sequence and post the list, and just because right now we're at the beginning of the series, and Sir Matt and I have read the series, you guys have read the series, so we're going to continue with the main reread. But on Patreon, we thought, dang, let's just jump it. This is kind of a cool way to bounce around.
Cool way to do it, and that way for some of the more seasoned listeners in terms of reading, if you really want to start doing some of this, like the later chapters and books and stuff, this is a cool way for us to kind of do it with you guys. So that and we comment and all that kind of stuff there too. So it's more chapters, but it's later in the series, since it kind of works out right now, since we're at the beginning of we're still in a Game of Thrones.
Yep.
So if you want to start talking about the last 2 books, then boom, here's a cool way to do it.
Then there it is. Yeah. And it might even help to have that. We were thinking too, as a foundation for folks who come in later, when Winds of Winter comes, we'll have another big jump in listeners, and it'd be nice to have that to fall back on, to say, hey, if you want some discussion to kind of get your mind back into what happened in A Feast of Crows and A Dance of Dragons, here it is, as we dive into Winds of Winter when it comes out. So it might seem like it's all over the place, but we'll make sure that it's real structured and ordered, for you guys to follow along with A Feast of Dragons. It's been out there for a while, folks. I just came across it and was like, I was done with my POV rereads, and I thought, well, I need something different. I need a different, thing, a way to go back and get my mind in the right place to discuss some of these theories that folks keep bringing up, and that was presented to me as an option. So we'll get that. When we think about getting that going, probably like in a couple months here or something.
Sometime soon.
Because we have some show stuff we want to do for Patreon, leading into these next couple months. But I bet around April, we'll be ready to, or during the show or right after, we can start that. So.
Yep, absolutely.
So, all right. Real quickly though, just our bannermen here. We have Lord Jason of House Ross, Lord Hunter the Foulmouth, Lady Amanda of House Richardson, Lord Adam, the Young Bull of House Parker, Sir Peter of House Whittingham, the Ghost of Harrenhal, Lord Thanos of House Titan. And it was nice today. We got to talk with Sir Peter, and hadn't had a chance to talk with him in Raven's Nest, the first one, and he was able to get on this time, and it was awesome. A lot of fun. Good guy. So.
All right. Well, we want to thank you for playing the Game of Thrones. In our next episode, we will be discussing Chapter 52. Oops. Update the doc there. Chapter 52, John 7.
Yeah, absolutely. If you like our podcast, don't forget to subscribe, like us, write a review, leave a comment, or send us a raven at btkcast@gmail.com.
We will see you in a week, and remember that winter is coming.